Hello everyone, welcome back to the next lecture in our blockchains course. We're discussing use cases in the supply chain industry today. Be two use cases, two lectures talking about multiple use cases in the supply chain space. So first, I'll start out with a real world incident, which affected Walmart. Actually, cost them millions of dollars. So in China, what happened? It was probably a few years back, where Walmart was having pork in its retail stores, and they found out that one batch of pork was actually infected and was not fit for consumption. So what they tried to figure out where that batch of pork came from, and also where all that batch of pork could have gone. But they had no information about this because the supply chain is fairly complex. This pork could have come from some farm and maybe got stored in a warehouse, got refrigerated somewhere else, and then finally it would have reached the Walmart's retail store. They would actually have maybe 3 or 4 owners. It would have changed hands, and finally it would have reached Walmart's retail stores. Now, because of the fact that they had no idea where this pork came from, or even where all this pork went to, this batch of pork, that the infected one, which other Walmart stores this batch of pork went to, because they had no information about this, they ended up recalling all of the pork in all of China, which cost them millions of dollars. And of course, this was a serious issue, because if they can't let the pork just stay there, because if it was consumed, then even people might die. So just avoid that sort of a safety issue, they had to recall all of these pork things back. And you can see this kind of recall issue is not just limited to the food industry. It's actually big in the, let's say, the electronics industry, where maybe you find out that some devices are malfunctioning because, let's say, a part is not proper, and you end up recalling a large number of these devices. Or it could be in the automobile sector. So these things happen all the time. Now, in the food specifically, beyond just a monetary cost, this is also a safety issue where people might actually die, right? You don't want that to happen. So Walmart has had these issues in other places as well, with mangoes in Mexico, with spinach in California. So there are many of these incidents that have cost Walmart a large amount of money, and they were interested in finding out, can I know that a particular, as a customer, or even, right, or Walmart or Walmart's customer, can I look at a batch of produce, let's say pork or mangoes or whatever it is, can I have an understanding of where it actually came from, how it's been processed? It's, let's say, from a farmer. Maybe there's some amount of manufacturing that's involved. Maybe the mangoes were made into mango juice, right? And then it got distributed, it got stored in a retail store, and then finally gets to a consumer. So can I just, maybe from my mobile phone, scan this particular produce, scan, let's say, some QR code there. Can I get information about exactly where this came from? And this is also important, if you think about it, it's also important in the organic space, which is actually a very growing business in almost every geography, right? Organic foods are becoming more and more important, and all of us, of course, we treat our health as the most important concern. So it would be great if we can get a provenance or a proof that this particular produce has actually gone through proper production standards for organic goods. They've been stored properly, they've been all through distribution and transportation, they've been stored properly, and they've not been infected. And finally, when I actually get those mangoes, I can actually trust that these are actually organic mangoes, they're of good quality, and I'm willing to pay a little bit extra for that because it does protect my health. So this whole food traceability and safety enabled by blockchain is seen as a very big use case, right? So it's probably in the several millions of dollars worldwide. So we want to be able to capture exactly where how goods have progressed from farm to fork. So that's the standard terminology. And along the way, there may be sensors which are tracking these goods. And there might also be inspectors who are coming in, and like the FDA, who are coming in and checking whether these goods are actually good. So there are multiple organizations that are involved along the process. And we can have IoT and other capabilities, even analytics that are built in that detect whether things are going okay. So there could be anomaly detection to see that okay, now the temperature seems to be a bit off, and that might be a risk for the goods for the agricultural produce to get spoiled. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do at the intersection of AI, IoT, blockchain in this space. So there's also governments are also waking up to this about the importance of food safety. The Indian government is also doing certain things, not necessarily on blockchain, but in bringing forward safety acts, right? So these are regulatory requirements on how food produce has to be, how produce has to be cultivated, how they have to be processed and distributed. Right? So there is a foreign supplier verification program that the FDA actually brought into force last May. So this came into effect May in 2017. And what this is about is US actually imports a large amount of their food requirements from outside. So they're a big importer of food and agricultural produce. So there is a requirement on the importers. So whoever is importing, let's say Walmart is importing these agricultural produce from Brazil or the Caribbean islands, Walmart then needs to ensure that whoever the exporters are verified and they are actually adhering to best practices for production, cultivation, processing, distribution, and so on. So the FDA mandates that the importers in the US are required to verify whether the exporters and the distributors are adhering to best practices. So this is a burden on the importers, but it's a matter of safety. Right, so these sorts of federal requirements or the government requirements are coming into play in many jurisdictions actually. So the very related aspect of this whole food safety aspect is really visibility into what is happening in the supply chain. For instance, as an exporter, I would like to know where my goods are at any point of time. As an importer, Walmart, for instance, I'm running out of meat produce. I want to refill my stock, right? I want to know where the next batch of goods are coming from. How am I going to refill this, right? So there's a visibility aspect across the supply chain, not just for the end users, but for every intermediary also. There is a visibility issue today. So they all have just local visibility, but they would like to have end-to-end visibility. And it's similar to the logistics space, just that this might be maybe a smaller problem within a local environment. There are many noteworthy startups that are just solving this visibility problem, right? So there's Provenance, which has a nice white paper. They track goods from source to retail store. And what they also do in addition is that they encourage producers and sellers to prove their claims of quality. Let's say there is a producer that claims that I'm going to sell organic mangoes. Then what Provenance as a startup, what they ask the producer to do is also document exactly what steps they've taken to ensure that this produce is actually organic. And then the producer can actually put out all of this information, and the consumer can then actually trust this information that you're actually doing all of these things for the mangoes that I've just purchased. This could also be in terms of sustainable production, right? So how are you making sure that you're not overusing the soil, for instance, or you're not depleting resources, water, for instance, in your area? If you can provide proof for some of those things, then consumers are actually willing to pay extra for that. There's another startup called SkuChain, which also does this kind of tracking of goods in a supply chain. And apart from that, they also have some supply chain financing solutions, which we talked about, right? So they do a mix of some of these use cases for supply chain industry. So I'd encourage you to check out these startups and what they're doing, right? It's very interesting to follow this space. So this is another very interesting use case in the supply chain space. So if you think about some of the leading brands of let's say t-shirt manufacturers or people who produce dresses, right, or apparel of any kind. many of these brands, the large brands, the way they produce their shirts and dresses, the way they do that is actually they have a very complex orchestration process where, let's say, maybe the yarn, the raw material for this shirt might actually come from one place. Actually, let's take an example, right? Egyptian cotton is extremely popular. They have very good quality cotton there, and I might actually advertise saying I'm actually using very high quality cotton for my dress, right? They might source these the yarn itself from Egypt. The weavers and dyers might be, let's say, in places like India and Bangladesh, where we have very good facilities for, we have expert craftsmen, and we have also have very good quality dyes. So the actual dyes might come from India and maybe Bangladesh. And then some cutting and assembly might, let's say, one of them might be India, the other might be Bangladesh, or it could be Indonesia, right? And finally, there's some zippers and other small things, right? Buttons and all have to be attached. So all of this might actually be happening in a different place. So there's actually a global orchestration that needs to happen. And think about this. So all of this has to happen in a short time frame, and they all have to be orchestrated well. Now there'll be problems if, let's say, the yarn is there, but the weavers and dyers are not there, right? So the yarn will be waiting at the next location, right? From Egypt, it's come to India, but then the weavers and dyers are probably doing something else, and they're not available to work on this particular order. So anywhere on the supply chain, if there are delays, it could cause serious financial implications, right? And this also has a very big play in the fashion industry. So fashion, as you know, is changes very dramatically. It's a very high-end industry, a lot of money in it. And every couple of months, there's a new fashion trend, right? So if you are going to cause delays in this, if you are not there in time, you're going to miss that trend. So whatever you produce is going to be obsolete by then, right? So those sorts of problems also arise, right? You and I might not experience this, but in the high-end fashion industry, it becomes a very, very important challenge. So today, if you think of how these kinds of orchestration works, like I need to have the Egyptian cotton ready, have the yarn prepared, and after 3 days, it'll get shipped to India, and there, when the shipment comes in, I need to have the weavers and the dyes ready. And then once that is done, another 3 days, I need to have the next cutters, and the assembly has to be ready. So this is a very complex orchestration that has to happen with pinpoint precision, right? Now, today it happens very manually, right? It involves a lot of phone calls, emails, coordination amongst all of these entities to make sure this happens smoothly. Now, what if we can do this on a blockchain platform? Now, all of these, they all share information about how things are progressing, and you can also do advanced prediction. So I know that this cotton is going to get delayed by a couple of days, and I can accordingly adjust what my weavers and dyers are going to work on, right? Or I can have my raw materials ordered in time for when the goods are going to come through. So there are a lot of these, again, small optimizations that can be done, which have a profound impact on the end-to-end timeline as well as the cost of production. So this kind of supply chain orchestration, you can think of it, I took the example of clothing, but these kinds of orchestration also happens in other industries like the automobile industry and so on. So again, this is a very important problem, these kinds of supply chain orchestration, and you can bring that on into a blockchain platform and have all of this automated as a smart contract on blockchain. Right? Each of these entities participating in the blockchain and providing information for it. So that kind of concludes the first section of the supply chain use cases. So again, a couple of quick videos on this to just give you a feel for some of these use cases. The Walmart Food Safety Solutions is a small 3-minute video motivating the use case and talking about what we are actually doing in the space using blockchain. And there's also a pharma supply chain tracking, again a video and some of the challenges in the pharma industry and how their supply chains work. With that, thank you. We'll see you soon in the next lecture.